Hey everyone, we're talking about the trials and tribulations of what it means to learn art, what it means to be an artist. My name is Justin Donaldson.
I'm Grace Winstead.
And I'm Rachel Dene.
And this is the Paint and Pixels podcast. So today I think we're going to talk about taking yourself seriously as an artist, or sometimes even taking yourself too seriously, and sometimes taking yourself not seriously enough, and how that there's, at least in my experience, there's a really fine line that you have to try and explore in order to be able to kind of confidently create work. So Grace, when has taking yourself seriously been a bad option for you?
Okay, so this definitely used to be a problem for me way more like 10 years ago or so, but there was a point in my sort of art journey where I was very tied up in this idea of being a great artist or being a master artist. And I
Yeah.
really wanted to achieve that level of skill. And I wanted to achieve that level of skill so bad that I was like anytime that I would make something, so I wasn't at that skill at that time, and anytime I would make something that I perceived as bad or not as good as the artist that I was admiring, I sort of took it as like a self like reflection, like a ding against myself, right? It wasn't that this is just where I am in my art journey and I just need to get better and keep working at it. It was, well, I'm just not a good artist. And I feel like that is a really poor mindset. I feel like it's a mindset that really holds you back because it did me. It makes you scared. It makes you scared to try new things and to practice things that you know you're going to be bad at, which you have to do to improve. None of us sit down and create masterpieces, and we have to constantly push ourselves out of our comfort zone to be able to further our skills. But it makes you scared too, because when you do, it's inevitably going to be not great to start with. And so you sit down and you create something and it's not great. And you're taking it so seriously. Well, I'm just not as good as them. But you're ignoring the fact that at one point they weren't as good as they are now,
Yeah.
And for me, that's where I really needed to step back and stop taking the art so seriously and stop seeing it as a self-reflection of myself and just have fun with the sort of creating process. Because as soon as I sort of learned to let go, it became very fun to try new things. Even if the product that I made wasn't necessarily astounding or amazing, it was just fun to try. And that has allowed me to really push my skills and try new things. And those are the things that have really gotten me to where I feel like I'm at a level that I'm quite happy with. Obviously, I want to continue improving, but me 10 years ago would be thrilled to see where I am right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, there's this thing about identifying with your art, like to think and say that my art is this really strong reflection of me. And it kind of, there's a point where there's truth to that, where it's very personal and very much like it's a reflection of what you can do, and it's a reflection of how you see things. So that I think there's it's so natural for us to fall into that habit of really identifying with our art. But like you said, the minute that you do that, and I've been there too, the minute that you do that, then every failure of art is a failure of you.
Yes.
And that is crippling.
It's hard.
And I think in a lot of ways it comes down to almost you have this clutching or this feeling like you really have to make the best thing right now all the time. And I see this with students a lot. So we're just starting up a course right now, and even still, you can see some students. I'm teaching some very specific skills, and it's not about whether it's right or wrong in art, but you need this skill. So let's actually just focus on this skill. And immediately people start to not work on that skill. They're working on making their painting the best painting it could ever possibly be. And therefore bypassing that skill and not actually being able to, and it's funny, you just see people shoot themselves in the foot. And I'm not saying that even as a critique, because like you said, you've done it, I've done it, we've all been there. But the minute that you start identifying with your art and taking it like this thing needs to be absolutely perfect right now, is the minute you stop learning and the minute you
Yeah.
stop being able to have fun and explore.
Yes. I see so many people like background, because I do a lot of character work. So a lot of the people that follow me like to make characters, they tend to
Yeah.
be character people. And I'll see a lot of them like, oh, you're really good at backgrounds. I don't do backgrounds. I'm not good at them. And I'm
Oh yeah.
well, that's do them, do them and make terrible, like make horrible, awful environments and keep making them. And then you'll find that they get less horrible and awful. And eventually you're gonna make really good ones. But you can't be scared. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think when we take it very seriously, it becomes scarier. It's no longer just about the fun. It's scary, because then if you fail, are you a failure? And of course you're not, but it kind of feels like it.
Yeah. And I think it comes down, like we're talking about, sort of identifying with it. It's the minute that you say I'm an artist, the minute that you say this is who I am and what I do. I am an artist, and then suddenly you start to question yourself because you made a really bad piece of art, and you're like,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not an artist, and so it takes you to existential places. Like, I thought I was an artist. If I'm not an artist, what am I?
I think
Nothing.
the I think the masters and professionals also make it look so easy too. So it feels like they just can do it. It feels like we just can't. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's not the case. It's just that you get to a level where you've had so many years and you've solved so many problems that this stuff becomes second nature. And that's just, at one point they were making bad stuff too. We all do.
Yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with the idea of talent, right? The
Mhm.
idea that art is a talent, that you're kind of born with it, that you're just you come out of the womb with a paintbrush in your hand and like you're just amazing. But
Yeah.
that's not the reality of how it goes.
No.
That's not, it doesn't take into account the amount of hours and time people put in order to actually become any good at any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you see somebody else who you think has talent, and you're like, well, if they have talent, then I must not. But so much of it comes down to, like you were talking about, experience, and experience comes from doing really bad art.
Yeah. Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by my online painting courses. Now, whether you want to learn to paint landscapes in any medium, to figure out how gouache works, to work your way through form and rendering to make your paintings pop and feel lifelike, or you want to learn how to make hand-painted anime backgrounds, I have exactly what you need. My goal is to help you become a proficient and confident artist, and I'm really excited to see that happen. Now, you can find these courses in the link below, and I can't wait to share everything I know with you. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
So in some ways, I do still find myself taking things too seriously and getting caught up. And it's not quite the same as what we were just talking about. But the ways that I find myself doing it is, if I sit down to try and create a project, like maybe a world building project or a series of paintings, I start to almost want to incorporate everything in it. So
Yeah.
like I want it to sort of, like reflect emotional experiences, and I want it to like have multiple kinds of environments and all kinds of people. And so like the scope of what I'm trying to do just increases significantly. And then I can't do it. and then
Yeah.
it's like, because I want it to be like the best. I want it to be everything and inclusive of everything and meaningful to everyone. And I want everyone to look at it and relate to it and suddenly just think it's absolutely the best. And like in my head, I'm not really going through those actual thoughts, but I can recognize that is what I want for it.
Yeah.
Because you work on things that are meaningful to you and that are like, they're important. They become important. And then they become too important. And you think of the world of them. And I think, and so there's a really fine line where I have to rein things in. You're like, no. Like it doesn't have to be everything to everyone. It doesn't have to include every single environment and person and kind of emotional state. and that's when it goes from being about something to kind of again being about me, or me identifying with it too much, wanting it to be too much of everything. Because yeah, the minute I do that, it just becomes nothing.
Yeah, it just becomes a mess.
And
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore. And so that is one of the things where creativity like flourishes with restraint.
Yes.
And the minute your restraint is gone, you collapse.
Yeah.
So you always have to put restraints on it in order for yourself to be able to actually accomplish it.
It's like it overwhelms your brain when you don't have those restraints. You pile on so much, and then it doesn't become fun anymore because you're like, it just becomes too overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I always like to take my projects like one sort of bit at a time. Or if I have a painting where there's something in there that's kind of like intimidating to me, like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do all of this or whatever is in front of me. I like to do like, okay, well, I'll just start with this. I'll just start with like this one element. I'll paint it, and then I'll start with that. And that usually helps kind of get my brain back. It's like, okay, you can do this. If you can paint this, and you can paint that, and you know.
Yeah. So that there are also times where we don't take ourselves seriously enough, right? We're talking about like it kind of being a balance. And I know for me, some of the times, I don't know, where I feel like I can't do it, or I'm not good enough, or like, oh yeah, we're talking earlier about some authors, and something like James and the Giant Peach, where if you think about that story, it's a story about a magic something and a giant peach, and then they all go live in this giant peach and have giant insects and go on this adventure. It's like, how did you come to the point where you're like, yes, this is a good idea. This is very serious. And like, sometimes I suppose this is actually more about not taking myself seriously enough.
Something I thought that was so funny about that story is, as lighthearted as it seems, there's a scene in it where he mentions like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So like even within that story, there's world building.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes I feel like the things I need to do need to be important. Like they need to be big in order to be important, or they need to be serious in order to be important, or something like that. And you have these classics. And I remember I loved James and the Giant Peach. And I think you were saying earlier, like, if I were to try and come up with that story myself, I'd almost like just reject it, because it was like,
how would you tell that to a friend and try to make it sound as
Yeah.
in your head?
yeah.
Like, yeah, we use the earthworm to like hook up to 500 seagulls and carry out. Like that's the climax of the story.
Yeah.
And then you have J.R.R. Tolkien,
Yeah.
who is like almost, like, you just need to loosen up, man. Like,
Making like his own languages and stuff.
Right?
how
Yeah.
amazing, absolutely amazing. But it's like, I don't think I could ever take myself that seriously, like to think that my work is that good. But his work is that good. And at some point he was like, I'm gonna just do it, like,
Yeah.
and just get it done. And probably everyone around him, like, he set a whole new tone for the genre, and he changed things. And so like beforehand, I don't know, he wasn't coming into this like fantasy realm that's highly accepted and exactly the kind of thing, that an established thing that we have today.
Yeah, there had to have been people upset that he took the Fae and turned them into these beautiful humans, like not humans, but like humanoid giant. That would be
taking these like little tricksy pixie elves and then turning them into
there had
something
to have been
entirely
some
else.
like purists that were furious about that, right? There probably still are.
Yeah, there probably
Yeah.
are. And then you have C.S. Lewis. So C.S. Lewis, and like these guys are friends. These guys are like really good friends, and he just stole everything from everyone. Like every kind of mythology he just puts in. Like, so like we're talking about this immense lion, which kind of sounds unique, and then there's witches and this sort of like Camelot kind of feel to a lot of things, and then Santa Claus comes in, and And then there's like this like Greek mythology that he pulls in, and he's just like, he's not taking himself seriously in some aspects, because like he demands no internal consistency in the mythology of his stories, but he doesn't need it, and he makes it work, and it's like really fantastic. And so there are times where I feel like I try to take things too seriously, where maybe that's just not necessary. I don't know.
I totally agree. When me and my husband are like working on the comic story and stuff, it's really easy for us to fall into this idea, like we can tell it'll be like, okay, we're thinking too much.
Yeah.
Like you get to a point where you're thinking too much and you're trying to be smart, and you're like, no, we just need to step back and just, there's a point where you have to go, what do we want and what's fun? You know what I mean? Because there's room for all of this stuff, and not everything needs to be smart and deep. And you know what I mean? Like there's just room for so many different.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
trying to be smarter, like that is the most awful feeling. And you're like, come on, Brad, you've got it in there, right?
Yeah. And it's just, and me and my husband will be doing that, and we'll be like, you know what? We got to step back. We're just what's fun. And usually it ends up being the balance of that's perfect, right? You know, like times that having that sort of the smart side that kind of reins you in a little bit helps keep things a little more cohesive. But then you have that fun side that's like, okay, you know, not everything has to be like super serious, not everything has to be super smart. You know, some stuff can just be fun. And yeah, the biggest thing I noticed that is actually more on like my comic story, but that's related to my art. So
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think even if we're talking about writing or anything like that, it's all the same, really.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about, have you ever read The Sandman by Neil Gaiman?
Mm-mm.
It's this really cool story, and I think he did it pretty early in his career. It's a comic, and to get the comic out, you know, he writes the story, and sort of every section is given to a different artist.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool. So there's like a million different art styles involved in the creation of it, and every story, it's very loosely coherent. Like overall, it does a whole bunch of different things, and I think to me that's like this constant reminder that it doesn't always need to be so serious and so together in order to be good art and good story making. And yeah, it's really cool.
I think my struggle with taking myself seriously is that when I decided to become an artist, it was more about like it was deciding to take the process seriously.
Right.
And so I get caught up sometimes when I realize there's like a weak spot, like a big, like it could be characters, it could be landscape, it could be something really specific. And then like I have to start all over. Like this one thing has a whole new set of skills. And sometimes the things that I learn for that subject reveal like this thing I've been doing wrong. It's something I thought I was doing really good at. I'm like, no, I have to go all the way backwards. I learned this. And so, yeah, it almost feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, or 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, whatever.
Yeah.
Really frustrating at times but it's just because I'm taking myself seriously. And I know that tomorrow I'm going to study the same thing. The next day I'm going to study it until I get it right. I'm just going to keep studying. So,
yeah.
I think that's easy to have happen with art because art has such a high skill ceiling, right? Like we're always learning. Even if you talk to like a master, they're like, oh no, I have plenty more to learn, because I think it's sort of a lifelong type of hobby. There is no real point where you get like the best of the best. You know, there's always more you can learn. Definitely. And I think that for me, like, because I know how you feel, Rachel, and I think for me the biggest thing was just figuring out what I wanted to make and just have fun making it. That made it a lot easier for me, because then at that point, when it's like, oh, well, I'm still weak at this point, it's okay, because at least I can just go have fun, and I can sort of apply and try to learn or work on my weak points while applying them to things that I'm still having fun making. So it just kind of helps lessen the frustration of the constant like, wait, I'm not as good at that as I thought I was.
Right now I have this personal project that I'm working on, and I keep going back and forth where I'm like, okay, today I'm just going to have fun and be really in touch with what I like and what I want out of this, like the feeling of it, just the fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day I'll be like, okay, today I'm going to really study the things I know that I'm not good at. And then I'm like, crap, all this fun stuff I did yesterday is technically wrong. And then I really start doubting it. And I'm like, let's erase it all and start over. And that's got to be wrong. Like, I can't be doing that right.
It's
There's
hard to
got to
say.
be a better process.
It's hard to say. Well, I mean, like, so I talk about something pretty similar, which is an area that I've recently realized that I've been taking myself too seriously, or kind of fallen into sort of a cultural seriousness, which is that I've tried to paint people and draw people and sort of continually get better. And I think the classic approach to it has some serious flaws. The classical approach of getting all of your anatomy right, getting everything right, just like really focusing on like proportions and everything like that. I think obviously there's a lot of really good stuff to do with that. But I've realized recently that Grace shared with us a couple of comic book things, and there's this one called Understanding Comics. And so I've been reading it. And the way that he talks about comics is talking about when you look at a person, if you reduce down a lot of the qualities, then they become. And so what he's talking about visually is like he gets two dots and a big smiley face. So there's a really classic smiley face. And he's like, you know what? Anyone in the world can look at this and they see themselves because they see the basics of a human being. And so it's relatable to absolutely everyone. And just this idea of actually sometimes getting rid of the need for perfection and getting rid of a lot of stuff means that people can actually relate to it better. And I realized what I've been missing is almost like cartooning. Like really going into.
I've learned most of my human drawing skills is I've never paid much attention to sort of classic stuff. It's always been for me that sort of animators and cartoony stuff. And I think there's so much, even if you're not into cartoons, I think there's so much to learn from that because those people have mastered that sort of bringing the life and stuff into characters in a way that, this is just my opinion, that I don't think like the super old masters have quite as much. That's just my opinion, but
I agree with you. And I think that's what I've really come to realize. And a lot of my work has been, my figure work has been stiff and kind of unable to really get the expression. And so now my focus when it comes to people is how much emotion can I put in just the eyes? And right now, as cartoony as humanly possible, like how far can you push that emotion and just get it there? Someone's mowing. Is that our yard?
Lawnmower.
The guy who mows our property is here and he's mowing our property. Can you hear that at all?
I cannot.
If you can't hear that, then I think we just roll with it. So I'm ditching the traditional everything when it comes to painting people, drawing people, and I'm going full cartoon. And then when I want to, I really think if I can get that down, when I want to bring back reality, I can.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't do it the other way around. I can't just like.
I think it is harder to go there. At least for me, it was because that's how I started too. I started out like, I have to get my anatomy perfect and stuff. And I was so focused on sort of the realism aspect. And that's been very helpful. I'm not going to pretend like knowing anatomy hasn't been big because it has been. But it was when I read, for me, it was Walt Stanchfield's Drawn to Life books. And, he taught a bunch of classes for Disney animators. And basically these books are all of his sort of notes and things he would take. And they're condensed down for all the Disney classes that he took. And they're condensed down into like 2 volumes. And it was reading his books that really helped me because it helped me realize that, kind of like you, Justin, what I was missing was this sort of more cartoony, gesture life. You know what I mean? Everything I was drawing felt so stiff and it didn't have the life in it that I wanted. And
Yeah.
it's been actually simplifying things down and figuring out how to push things and make them more cartoony that I feel like my art is taking a huge leap with my characters versus when I was trying to do a more classical approach.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I think that's an area where I have really been taking myself too seriously, or like just buying into the, I don't know, Western classic art kind of persona mentality. And I've realized that that's there. I don't think I really clearly saw that until really recently. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Your project has got to be taking up a lot of your time, right?
It does, but I'm fine. I'm fine during an hour a week.
She's up for the long haul though. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
she got me.
this thing's gonna be.
You're an inspiration. I'm so excited now that I'm like determined to get through this. I've learned more in the last week than I have in the last year because I'm just decided I'm gonna take it seriously.
My comic is a long-term project. It's one of those that I plan on. It probably will be going for like the next decade. It's kind of one of those things that I want to just do it as long as I want to do it. You know what I mean? It's meant to be a long-running thing where I play with my characters and my world and stuff. And I've got a story, but I'm also gonna have times where I meander off for slice of life stuff. You know what I mean? It's just kind of this long-running thing. So it's not one of those that it's like, oh, I have to work on it 24/7 because I think I go crazy anyway. So
How did you get to the point where you are taking yourself seriously enough to do that, or you're taking your project seriously enough to do that?
I think that sort of, for me, once I decide to do something like that, that's kind of comes natural to me, right? Like if I decide like I'm going to make a comic, I'm the kind of person that I want to make it good. And I have my husband he's a software developer, but he's taken like a million lit classes, like, and he's so good at like stories and breaking stuff down. So having him to help me really helps because he's just indispensable for me with this. But that's kind of natural to me that I actually have a harder time letting go of the perfectionist and going, okay, but what do I want from this? Like, right? Like forget like trying to impress people and forget trying to impress yourself and what's just fun. That's actually harder for me. It's harder for me to not be serious. So I've had to find this sort of balance between something that I'm going to be proud to make and enjoy making, because I wouldn't have fun making something that I didn't feel like was a quality that I was personally fulfilled by, I guess. But I've also had to go, but what's also just some stupid fun that you just want to see and you want to do, and you don't care if other people are like, well, that's dumb, because I enjoy it. So it's just something that I constantly have to check myself. My husband's really good at helping me with that. He'll be like, okay, no, let's stop thinking. What do we just want to see? Even if it's dumb, what's fun? And so that's for me. I have to actually pare down the taking myself too seriously. So that's natural for me. If I have a project, I automatically go to the too serious, and I have to pare it down to the, okay, but what's fun and what's dumb and enjoy.
What are the biggest indicators for you that you've reached that point of taking things a little too seriously?
I'm struggling. That's for me when I'm sitting there and I can't think of things and I'm like it feels like I'm hitting a wall with my project or my story or even the art piece I'm working on. That usually means that I'm overthinking it too much. And I need to pull back and I need to reassess and figure out, okay, let's go down to the stop being smart and stop thinking, and what do I want? What do I want from my story, or what I want to create, or what do I want from this art piece, or what would be fun? So usually for me, if I'm hitting a wall and I'm struggling and I'm fighting with something, that usually means I'm thinking too much.
So in this case, like the opposite of taking it too seriously is more about reconnecting with yourself and your intentions. Like, what do you want?
Yes, and what brings me joy? What makes me happy? Because it may not be something super smart or intellectual or amazing that just brings me joy. It might be something simple and dumb, or not dumb, but you know what I mean, just more simple, or something that just what makes me happy is usually what I need to stop thinking so much and figure out what I'm gonna have fun doing. Because that's, for me, like that's what my art, I try to keep it. I try to keep it as something that brings me joy and makes me happy.
So yeah, that's almost kind of like taking yourself more seriously, just taking the joyful parts and the things that are meaningful to you, which is very easy for us to like neglect. fun,
Yeah.
and taking them more seriously and taking these other things less seriously. But those other things are more like at least for myself, my own experiences, they're more like these external standards or things that I feel like I should be doing. Anytime I feel like anytime I say that I should do something, really means that like I don't really want to do it, but I think I have to do it because someone else said I have to do it at some point.
Yeah.
And so there's the idea of almost like other people, right? Like you can take other people's opinions and thoughts and feelings too seriously.
I think that's something that I think it comes natural to everybody. And I think we all are sort of wired to really care what others think. You know what I mean? And I think we have a lot of times way too much. And most of the time, like the vast majority of time, way too much. And I think it's something that you almost have to actively work on to really try to make sure that your focus is on what you want and you're not sort of letting those influences that aren't necessarily you come in. You know what I mean? Like, I know that I've had to work on that. And like at this point, I don't really care. At this point, I really don't care what other people think of my art. I really don't care. Like my family, I do a lot of sexy art and they all see it and I don't care at this point. Like I just don't. I don't care what they think of that. And it's something that it's really nice.
That is nice.
It's a really nice thing to just not care. But I think like I remember like years ago, like if somebody would leave me like unsolicited critique or whatever, it would hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I mean it's really understandable.
Yeah, it would be like your anatomy's off or whatever, and I'd be like, oh, it's so easy. Like now it's like now I don't really care so much, you know, because it's like, well, if it is off, I work so regularly on anatomy that I know 3 months from now I'll be better. And like one person telling me that's off in one picture probably isn't going to help me nearly as much as just my studies will, you know. Yeah. But like, yeah, I remember, you know, 10 years ago, somebody would leave me like a critique or something, and it would hurt. It would be like, it would hurt my feelings. But now I don't care anymore. But
I know for me, something that really helped me was, and I may have said this before, but realizing that that when somebody says something is wrong, it's probably wrong. You know, it's having an effect on them, right? Mm-hmm. When they tell me what to do to make it right, they probably don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And so I can take in the information, but it's not actually the information that they think it is. It's just information that like this is having an effect that feels like something. Mm-hmm. And they're not, if I'm talking about, I'm talking about people who aren't necessarily artists or don't necessarily know what they're talking about. And I can say, yes, okay, very cool. Something's going on. And I can reject everything else they say because they probably don't know. But that means that like, okay, this is relevant and real and something I need to look into and see what I think is actually happening.
Yeah, you kind of have to parse through like, okay, where is this information coming from? And you know what I mean? And
as well as like you might get critique from people who know what they're talking about. And I would hazard to say that like, unless also a part of the conversation is intention, like what you're planning on doing with your art, then but like for you, like, but the background doesn't really matter in what I'm trying to communicate. Mm-hmm. And so like critique the background all you want, like whatever, it's not going to change because it's doing its function, it's doing its job.
Yes. I think that's the thing with critique is you always have to keep in mind that person very well may have a point, but they also probably don't know exactly what you were trying to communicate. And so much of an art piece is that communication. You know what I mean? That it's almost easier if like, usually it's better to me if you seek somebody out and tell them like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Usually you can get better input than just a random, like, those random people that just come to you on the internet and they're like, blank. You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
to me, a lot of times that's if you're to listen to, because they don't, versus if I seek somebody out, I can tell them what I'm intending and I can get probably better input that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel the opposite, because a lot of the times if someone random says something, like if they say, like, for example, if they're like, oh, what a nice shark, and you actually tried to do a dolphin, right?
Yeah, I think it depends on what
Right.
exactly TK
The
is.
odds are they probably weren't trying to insult you. There is just, you literally might have done something a little wrong, right? You're not communicating clearly, and so you know that that's wrong. Versus if you seek someone out for critique and they're digging deep to try to figure out what to fix, I don't think they're looking at it the way that someone normally would.
That's a really good point.
Right? Like I know for me that I can just get way too deep in when someone asks me for a critique and they really just wanted like a tiny suggestion.
Yeah.
At the same time, in that environment, they're literally looking for what's wrong.
Exactly.
Right? Like they're literally,
you're gonna find something.
even
right?
if nothing is really wrong, there's always ways to make it better.
Yeah.
And so like,
and better is opinion.
better is,
so it's there's like a kind of cliche piece of advice of don't take opinions from someone you wouldn't want advice from. And I kind of go off of that a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to seeking critique, I kind of go off of that. So,
I do too.
Or
Yeah.
Justin, he's my fountain of wisdom over here.
Good times. Yeah, so maybe one final thing to talk about is as a teacher, because I do a lot of teaching. I know you get a lot of people asking you to help them.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, you need to take yourself seriously enough to be like, yeah, this is how a thing is, and not so seriously that like your whole worldview can't change in like 5 minutes of learning something new. And I have some friends. I have some friends who really know what they're doing and could teach and could write, and they're terrified of going out there and saying something and it not being the whole and absolute and continual truth. And, like part of
it is really tricky.
It is really tricky. I know for me, part of getting to the point where I feel like I can talk about things is you guys probably know this, but like I talk about things as if they're like they're not absolutely true.
They're not.
Everything is relative. Everything is about perception. Everything is and I say everything is relative, and I'm making an absolute statement, right? But I think at some point what you're saying is helping somebody, and that's what's happening. Not that you're proclaiming a truth or that you're kind of going out of you're not so serious, right? But you're helping someone, and you're because with art there's no single way of doing things, and there's many paradigms and many ways of thinking about things, and you have to switch between them in order to make something successful. And so when you talk, you're simply exploring an idea and exploring a paradigm. And the problem and the amazingly wonderful thing is that tomorrow you're going to learn a new paradigm and be able to add it to what you do. And that is kind of like all additive. But I know for me, like, I had a big problem at the beginning with trying to start talking about things, and even looking at some of the tutorials I did at the beginning. I really want to take them down because even though I still believe in all of the things that I was saying, like there are some things that weren't the best way of teaching and didn't necessarily kind of connect with how some people feel like they need to be taught. And so, yeah, like in some ways I struggled at that point with taking myself seriously enough to be able to say something helpful, because I didn't think that I like really could say something helpful. But but you just gotta do it.
But
I don't know.
I think you do a really good job at trying to let people know how, because art is such a wide field, there are no absolutes. Like as soon as you say something about landscapes that are like based on reality, then if someone tries to apply that surrealism, it kind of falls apart. Or
Yeah, sure.
like
Yeah.
it's really hard to nail it down when you're talking about art being right or wrong.
Right.
I always
Well,
look at like, because I've had a lot, I'm going to be launching a Patreon soon, and I get a lot of people that ask me like lighting, a lot of stuff that a lot of people will be like, oh, show me how you do your lighting and stuff like that. And for me, I always look at it as like, I'm not really nervous about making them, because I try to keep in mind that these people just want to sort of pick my brain. They want to know my thought process, and they want to know how I'm achieving the sort of effects or the looks that I'm getting in my art. And the truth of the matter is, whether that might change in a year, but right now, that is something that I can help people with. If they just want to know how I'm doing something, well, I can show them how I'm doing something. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, that may not be an absolute perfect rule, but I don't really, I guess, get in my head too much about it, because I'm not worried that I'm going to be teaching something wrong, because I can't teach them wrong showing them sort of the way I do things, because it's the way I do things, you know? It's like picking my brain kind of thing.
Yeah, that is really true. Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like being an artist is like trying to assign yourself this destiny. Like, I will be an artist. Right? Like, I don't know what success as an artist exactly looks like. So for me, I'm trying to get really specific goals. And I'm like, if I hit that, then I will feel successful. And let's hope that's true. But it's definitely better than not having any goal. You can't be successful if you don't have something you're trying to succeed in.
I feel like there's this balance, though, because I feel like there's some degree to where chasing goals can be kind of like, you get there and you're like, oh, well, that didn't do it, so the next one, you know what I mean? I think you have to find that balance between working towards something, which, like, I know exactly how that feels, because I'm constantly.
I think if you're expecting the goal to make you happy, you're gonna fail for sure.
I think that's why it's so important, like I say, to just fall in love with the process and the journey.
Yeah.
If you fall in love with the journey, it doesn't matter where you went up. You know, you're always
like reaching the goal line is the goal. Like, it's not any specific result.
It's not more than the goal.
Yeah, and definitely the process too.
Yeah. See, it's like Instagram numbers, right? Like, at one point I had like 3,000, and I'd have been thrilled with, I think I have like 17 and a half or something like that right now. And I'd have been thrilled with that. But now that I have it, I'm like, well, that's not that much. And I know, as like, well, that's not that much. Some people have 1 million. You know what I mean? It's so hollow.
So relative.
Yeah, it's like, once you get it, you don't really feel like you got it. You feel like, oh, well, they have way more. They have 50,000. You know, it's.
I think of goals as being more about like a sort of like a state that you'll be in, not the actual, like, for me, it wouldn't be, I want 100,000 Instagram followers exactly. It'd be more like, I want to reach this number and have like a good connection with my followers and be happy, like, doing it. Because you could buy 1,000, 100, whatever Instagram followers, right? But if your goal is to picture yourself in that place and how you're interacting with those followers and what kind of content are you putting out and how is that connecting to them, if like that's your goal, I don't think you'll be disappointed if you hit it.
So long as you can quantify what that goal is.
Yeah, you have to be specific. That's what's so hard.
Yeah. Because like I think for my amount of followers, I have a really engaged following. I love my following. They're super engaged. And I feel like my numbers are pretty well for having what I consider, as far as Instagram goes, a not huge following. But it's one of those, like, I almost have to just like whatever, because it's still, you can have it and they're still engaged, but you're still, somebody else still has more, and you're just, you know what I mean? So I just have to like love the process and the journey of the art. That's, for me personally, that's what I have to really focus on, because everything else is just, it ends up feeling kind of hollow, like because there's just always so much more you can reach for, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think you always have to be more than your art.
Yeah.
You have to be more than what you create and what kind of followers and numbers. Like, you have to be bigger than that. You are bigger than that.
Yes.
You just have to not like restrict yourself to those things.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard. All right, well, I think that's it for the day, guys. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Hi.
Nice.
That'll do it.